Greetings, everyone. Welcome on into the Wolverine podcast here on Monday, November 3rd. It's hard to believe we're already into the month of November, but such is life when football season is fun and flying by and basketball season on the horizon. Anthony Broom here, of course, with Chris Ballas and Clayton Safey. We are not live this week because we do have basketball duties tonight for the first time this season as Michigan takes on Oakland to open up their campaign. We'll talk a little bit of hoops in this show a little later on, something a little more evergreen since the show probably will date itself if we were to talk games and predictions and things like that. We'll also talk Michigan football's game against Purdue. They're at 7-2, heading into a bye week now before returning to game action Saturday, November 15th at Wrigley Field. Speaking of Wrigley Field, Chicago Cubs City Connect hat on today against the Northwestern Wildcats. So, fellas, welcome back. A lot to get to today. Where do we even begin other than hello?
Noon kick against Northwestern. So that's going to be nice. Big noon, right? So I like that, which means 11 o'clock. It's not as much time for tailgating in Chicago, but still win over Purdue. Not a great, I guess every win's a good win, but not a good looking win. Ugly win, just win, right? A lot of injuries. So now we move on. So nice to have a bye week, guys, and get caught up on some writing, do some magazine stuff, and hope that Michigan wins these next two to set up a great game with Ohio State with all the marbles.
I'm beaming. It's basketball season. It's football season. This is the best time of year. You got Feast Week in a few weeks. Michigan, Ohio State coming up. Michigan's on a 3-game win streak in football. So a lot of exciting things going on now, and we'll be good to be at Chrysler tonight, but excited to break down the game and whatever else is thrown at us here.
And Michigan has never had an in-season 4-game win streak under Sherrone Moore, or it could be up as many as 5, depending on how these next couple of weeks go. But Clayton also bolted up today. A big win for those guys in, I believe, Nashville yesterday.
Yes, huge.
We won't talk about any other football from the NFL this weekend, but
what about J.J. McCarthy, man? He looked good, and he's never lost a start in Michigan. And Colston Loveland's never lost a game in Ohio, even after yesterday, game-winning touchdown. Awesome day for Team 144.
Yeah, well, good for JJ. Anyways, we are brought to you today by our friends over at Homefield Apparel. They have been great partners for us over the years. The weather has turned to that November chill. I'm seeing maybe even snow in the forecast next week. So you're going to need some long sleeves. You're going to need the T-shirts, the crew necks, the hoodies. They've got a new varsity jacket in there that looks pretty awesome. So no better way to restock your Michigan collection. Or if you're a rival fan watching our podcast, if you're a fan of a directional school, whatever it is, Homefield's probably got a collection for you, and a super loaded collection at that. So head on over to homefieldapparel.com. Get in on the fun and the games over with our friends in Indianapolis. They're also Indiana fans. They have a great football team with Kurt Signetti down there in the heart of Big Ten country. So shout out to Homefield Apparel, and you can check them out over at homefieldapparel.com. We're also brought to you by ourselves at the Wolverine. You can use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of access to our site for only $1. At this point now, we're into the month of November. This is going to get you through the holidays. It's going to get you through the new year. So you use that promo code UM1. You're going to get all the goodies at our site behind the paywall, on the message board, into the year 2026, which doesn't even feel like a real number right now, but we are barreling towards the end of the calendar year here. So use that promo code UM1. Get yourself in for 2 months for $1. It is what Clayton Safey coined years ago at this point as the best deal in America. All right, well, we're going to start with football today. And as we do every week, we will move over to Clayton Safey's thoughts on the game against Purdue. Obviously, a tremendous column that comes out Monday mornings on it. But I've been on the air talking about it. Chris will be on with Ballas and Skeen at some point this week as they get that sorted out. Clayton, your thoughts on what was a 21-16 win over the Purdue Boilermakers, the 2-7 Purdue Boilermakers?
My thought was my 52-10 prediction was a little bit off based on how things went. And it's funny, I always say win by 1 or more, and maybe have to print some T-shirts at some point. I also say a lot, nothing weird. And when you fumble through the end zone and there's a touchback, then it turns into a weird game. And it was even weird before that. But it's a clunker of a game for Michigan. It's also a third straight win. And as Andy Staples says, win your clunkers, kids. And, you have to do that in college football. I guess you're afforded one if you're at Notre Dame and you play a weak schedule after you lose to Northern Illinois last year. But for the most part, you have to win these games. And when you already have 2 losses, you have to find a way to win regardless. And Michigan did that. I think the game looks a lot differently if you score twice in the red zone. But even then, it still would have been a ton of things that you need to clean up and figure out if you're going to beat the better teams. At the same time, without the benefit of hindsight, we have to look at it like that. But let's say they win the next 3 games and they're in Indianapolis or they're in the college football playoff, and then no one really cares how it went. But in the moment, they look like a team that needs to get a hell of a lot better, to compete with the Ohio States of the world, because that game's at the end. And you can't play the way you did on Saturday night and expect to beat Northwestern or Maryland either on the road, even though one of them's essentially a neutral site type of game. So, I think this game pretty much starts with Jordan Marshall and the heroic performance that it was from him. I mean, 185 yards, the most by a Michigan player on the ground since Donovan Edwards in the 2022 Big Ten championship game win over these same Purdue Boilermakers. And just the amount of runs you could point to is just ridiculous heart and determination from him. The 3rd and 4 at the end when they had to pick it up and he pushes the pile, the 54-yard touchdown, to get them going was huge as well. And the 25-yard catch before that, I mean, you could go on and on about what he did. The defense allowed them to drive too many times, I think, into Michigan territory 4 or 5 times for Purdue, but they came up with some pretty big stops. Derek Moore, stopped 2 straight drives at the beginning of the game. You had the 3rd and 2 and the 3rd and 1 and the 4th and 2 later on with a bunch of backups in there. So you're extremely banged up. You need the bye. You had a bunch of, Anthony, you called it a ragtag group, especially on defense in your headline the other night. It fits, and now you survived, but tons to get better, and really have to get better, and really haven't looked like a great team under Sharon Moore in any game, maybe other than against a Power 4 team in any game other than Northwestern a year ago, in terms of all 3 phases. So you're still waiting on that to come.
Yeah, and we're approaching the end of year 2 here, and a lot of young guys up front and on the offense, right? If you look at, I think 6, 7 starters with freshman eligibility. So yeah, it's going to maybe look clunky at times. It's the attention to detail and the lack of attention to detail, and we hear it like each week. Well, this play would have worked at Michigan State if this guy would have been aligned right, or if this guy had done this. Or this play would have been worked if this guy had blocked better. And I go back to, and I'm not making a comparison between coaches here, but I go back to the Brady Hoke era when he used to say, well, it's not the same thing each time. It's one different thing every time, and it's just like, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't get fixed. I don't care if it's not the same guy making the same mistake. If somebody makes a mistake and then on the next play, another guy makes a mistake when the other guy doesn't, it's the same result. So there are things that they need to fix and to get cleaned up on both sides of the ball. But they did have a lot of injuries. There's no question about it. Bryce Underwood has regressed a little bit. He looked in his first game, he looked confident. The way he was throwing the ball on the run, he was accurate. We can point to receivers. We can point to the offensive line, and there's a case to be made that, yeah, both of those areas, they need to improve dramatically, but he's not making the throws that he was earlier in the year, guys, on the run. He's missing badly on some throws and not protecting the ball as well as he was. You can't have a fumble through the end zone. I think that's 3 or 4 fumbles now. I think he's gotten 1 back maybe, but you got to protect the ball better than that. You got to make better decisions, and he's not seeing the field as well as he should be at times either. Donovan McCulley was open in the end zone, I think, on one of the potential touchdown on the interception he threw. So a lot to work on still. Looks like, there are some times that guys are lollygagging on plays. I hate to say that, but this guys, if you make great plays, it's great. I want every guy to play like Aiden Hutchinson every play, and that should be the expectation of Michigan, right? So there were a couple times that edges kind of gave up on plays and were kind of standing and watching. And I'm like, what the hell is he doing? Get out there and get in the play. So these are all things that have to be cleaned up if you want to beat Ohio State. Frankly, if you want to win all the rest of the games before then, too, the other two with Northwestern and Maryland, you should be good enough talent-wise if you get some of your guys back to slog your way through a couple more. But you really want to be playing good football going into that Ohio State game, because obviously that's the one that really, really matters.
I think, and I talked about this a little bit during the post-game show we did on Saturday night. I think what bothers me is they have to have a bye week, or these games that go poorly, for them to kind of click back into focus and focus on some of the detailed things. We talked about the buy-in week from last year prior to the Northwestern game, and the response to the Oklahoma game this year, the response to the USC game. And is this a young football team, particularly on offense? Yes. Has Bryce Underwood regressed the last 2 weeks? Yes. I don't think he's seeing the field very well at all. I don't think he's confident in the decisions he's making. There's times where he could tuck the ball and run and doesn't, and he throws an interception. There's times where, he can tuck the ball and run, but tries to make something else happen instead. It's, I think the things that he needs to work on right now, this is a great week for that it is a bye week. But I think the through line between both of Sharon Moore's first teams is that they are capable of, winning by multiple scores against any team they play on a given week, but they are also capable of laying a complete egg against any of the teams they play, including Saturday against Purdue. It's why I don't think either of these next two games you could just pencil in as wins, because if you play poorly, either of those two teams are capable of beating you and taking advantage of your mistakes. So, for me, there is a maturity that needs to be found this week, not only with the roster, but quite frankly, the lens by which this coaching staff prepares its players, views its players, evaluates its players, because this is a really big 3-week stretch coming up. And no one wants to hear it, but it's within the range of outcomes that you play Ohio State hard and just lose a hard-fought game. But my fear is that if they do lose a football game or a couple football games, it's going to look a lot like the other losses do, because that's what they've been for 2 years. So they are better record-wise than last year. I am still somewhat worried about, stagnation in the middle part of the season. And last year, it obviously ended on a high note, but I don't think you could just bank on the lights coming on again. Any thoughts on that?
I can go. I think that I agree. I mean, I think that when you look at what the offense is specifically, it is very similar to last year in a lot of ways. From Chip Lindsey on down, I think they need to be better. And the offensive line is young, and but I think one of the problems they've had overall, and this seeps into what Bryce Underwood has become, is the offensive line's pass protection has been poor. He was pressured on 50% of his dropbacks, and he did miss quite a few throws, but and they are some throws that he has made this season that he's now missing the last 2 weeks. So that's a concern. But there are also some of the throws earlier in the year that he was making when he was under pressure. And it's the same thing now. He's under pressure and maybe he's missing them. The constant there is the pressure, and you're not going to have a game where you don't get hit or there's no pressure at all in your face, but it's just too often, even against a Purdue team that's not very good at getting after opposing quarterbacks. I mean, they just kind of rotate who starts each week. They rotate who's playing throughout the game because they're trying to figure out if anyone is worth a damn on that defensive front outside of the 1D tackle that's pretty good. And you're struggling to protect against those guys. So I think that's a huge issue. And then, the wide receivers not making plays is another one for Bryce Underwood as well, where he has to kind of, be perfect, I guess, for a play to work. I mean, then you watch J.J. McCarthy against our Lions yesterday, and his first touchdown pass, right? He places it really well, but it takes a one-handed catch by the best receiver in the world to haul it in, and it's a touchdown, and the Vikings win that game close. And it was just the plays, and no one's expecting anyone to be Justin Jefferson on this team, but there just aren't the plays being made around him other than the running backs, who have pretty much saved this season and carried this team offensively throughout the year, between Justice Haynes, who's over 800 yards, and Jordan Marshall, who's now over 700 yards. Those two have combined for 18 touchdowns. It is pretty remarkable what they've done. And Bryce Underwood, I'm sure, is very appreciative of what they've done for this, what they've done. But yeah, the misses in this pass game, he misses Jamar Browder on a post route. He misses Jordan Marshall when he could have just flipped it out to him. Instead, he decides to scramble on when he's rolling out to his right. Donovan McCulley, maybe it was a little too far for him, but he drops the pass on the corner route. Jordan Marshall gets beat on a blitz pickup on a third down. There's just one thing or the other with every single pass play, it feels like. And even the completions, some of them are sidearm around a defender, and it's a high degree of difficulty. So I don't know what the fix is this late in the year, but they do have 2 weeks to work on it, I guess. So, it's going to take everybody to get that thing going.
Yeah, and the pressure, that's a disappointment, right? I thought Andrew Stuber would be better at this point in the year. I think he had 3 pressures.
Sprague.
I'm sorry. Sprague, whatever, one of the Andrews, right? So, but regardless, yeah, come on, buddy, be better. And you're a veteran at this point, right? At this point in the year, there's that cliche, you're not a freshman anymore. Don't make those freshman mistakes. Be better. Rely on your technique, your fundamentals, especially against a team like Purdue. That's not very good. You got bigger challenges coming up. So the receivers, McCulley, sometimes the body language bugs me in the, he should have made a play on the deep ball. And I'm thinking, man, you're wearing the number 1 out there. There's a standard there. It's time to meet it. So, and it just, to me, there's so much, like I said, lack of attention to detail when it comes to run fits, when it comes to not catching footballs, special teams. We can talk about that probably for 10 minutes about everything that's gone wrong there, where the guys are aligning. It's not just who you're putting out there. It's, the decisions that are being made where guys are aligning. I think he had one kick into his blocker's ass, if I'm not mistaken, or it looked like it, maybe his helmet, but the whole thing just doesn't look right at this point. And there's still time with a bye week to fix things, but they've got a lot of work to do if they want to be where they want to be. So at the same time, you're 7-2, pretty much a product of the schedule more than anything, in my opinion. And people get mad at you for saying that, but it's kind of like Illinois last year. It's one of the reasons that I predicted that they were nowhere near a top 10 or top 15 team, like people were projecting them, because I thought they were a product of their schedule last year, and this year was much tougher. What do they have? 3 Big Ten losses already, if I'm not mistaken. So next year is going to be tougher for Michigan. So, but you can only play the ones in front of you. You got 2 more now to improve upon some things. We all, I think, we're in agreement that maybe there's a 1 in 4 chance or so of them beating Ohio this year. But last year it was probably 1 in 50 on the road. So anything can happen, especially if you improve. It starts, in my opinion, with Bryce Underwood getting his swagger back and looking like the quarterback we saw in week 1. When, man, he looked like it's like way beyond his years.
I guess my biggest question would be, like, yes, there's a bye week. There's 3 games to go. November's a very long month this year because November 1st was on a Saturday. But we're 9 weeks into the season. There were another, 3 or 4 weeks of fall camp, or 5-6 weeks of fall camp tacked on that. There was spring ball. There were all these areas where I guess I'm wondering, is there enough time to make the growth that we think they need to make, or is this simply what they are? Because I lean that this is simply what they are. And I'm starting to view the season a little bit differently in terms of, even later last year, like when it became apparent that, Sharon wasn't going to be a one and done, but like you knew they needed to get a transfer portal quarterback. They were probably going to need a number 1 or a new offensive coordinator. They were going to need some wide receiver help. I'm starting to view it like you would view maybe an NFL team that's not going to make the playoffs. Like, hey, when free agency rolls around, I got a shopping list in my brain already. There's coaching staff things that maybe need to take a look at. I don't want to say, am I crazy for starting to think that way? Or I'm having a hard time selling this as, oh, you win 3 games, you're in the college football playoff. I can't even talk college football playoff right now because I don't know if this team's going to beat Northwestern.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And but the narrative changes, right? With one or two good wins where you look really, really good. And I will go back to the teams of the mid 90s, for example, Lloyd Carr teams that, okay, they had 3 or 4 losses early. Then all of a sudden they start picking it up and they start playing like you expected them to play. And you get to Ohio State, and not only were you expecting them to be competitive in that game, but you're expecting them to win that game, even when Ohio State was number 1 in the country. So everything can change if you see good football being played. We aren't seeing that, and I don't think that's a stretch. And people get so mad at you for being honest. We've seen in my lifetime, I've seen so many Michigan football games. Right? You know good football when you see it. You know bad football when you see it. You know when there are issues beyond just, okay, this guy is dropping passes or something like that. It's more than that, and you can sense it and you can tell. And that's kind of where we are right now with so much to fix. And again, part of that might be the injuries, guys. You have to give them credit for what they accomplished with so many guys out. At the same time, some of those ones that have been replaced, guys, have been replaced with better players. If we're being honest, in my opinion, Jake Warnera might be their best offensive lineman right now. So Gio El Hadi has got to be playing. He's got to start picking it up and playing at a higher level. Excuse me, fellas. Sorry. So I'm allergic to something here, to bad football. But regardless, it's still, their goals are in front of them. And that's what Sharon Moore said, right? He said, okay, we're still 7-2. And so now you've got time. So hopefully we see some improvement for Northwestern that we didn't see against Purdue. Get some guys back and healthy. Doesn't look like Justice Haynes will be back. He's going to have foot surgery. But I will tell you this, Jordan Marshall playing the way that he thought he would be playing this year certainly helps. The depth hurts. It hurts the depth a little bit, obviously a lot, not having Justice Haynes in there as well. But nice to see Bryson Cudsdell step up a little bit too. So I like Jordan Marshall out there on the field. Just got to keep him healthy now. Can't afford any more injuries, fellas.
Man, the way he runs too, you're a little fearful of that, watching him. You know, the way he'll kind of like, he's trying to get his leg free, and then the way he falls, and sometimes it's like on his hand or something. It's like, just don't hurt a wrist or something like that. And when you carry 25 times in a game too, and he has done that twice this year, then you run the risk of that in general. But man, I mean, what other option do you really have if you're Michigan at this point? You got to lean on him and the defense and try to get other things going as well throughout the course of this. But no, I don't think you're wrong, Anthony. I think part of what your view is on this in terms of like looking ahead and, knowing what maybe you need to do better for the future and things like that. Part of it's just the nature of college football now, because you can kind of plug holes and turn over your roster a little bit more, I would imagine. And maybe it's more just for me, because I agree with you. I'm kind of looking at it through that lens as well. I think you have to at this point in evaluating the college football in 2025, 2026 coming up. But I mean, here's the thing. I think Michigan has run out of time to be Ohio State's equal or be better than Ohio State, but they haven't run out of time to get to that game with an opportunity to upset them. They weren't the better team last year when they beat them. They may not have been the better team without Blake Corum in 2022, but man, did they have the better coaches and they executed better on that day and they made a bunch of plays. They might not have been the better team in 2021 when they beat them up here, but they were much tougher, right? They embraced the environment and all these things, and they were upset wins. And when you win that game, then you deserve to say you were better, looking back at it. But, coming in, you were underdogs in all those and favored in 2023. So you're going to have to pull up an upset win over them if you want to beat them. And there's no problem with that if you get the job done. Still doesn't mean you shouldn't improve between now and November 29th, though, and win the next 2 games. I mean, it's of the utmost importance. And I think I said it last week, maybe it was on some sort of show, maybe it was with Jamie Morris. Like, winning is a little underrated in college football at times. Like, they moved on from Purdue. We're talking about it now. We're dissecting the corner route to Donovan McCulley and all this stuff that, that you take note of. But if they do win out, then it doesn't really matter. So, we got a show to do, and it's interesting to analyze all this and everything. But part of me is just curious to see what this is going to look like at Wrigley Field in 2 weeks. I know we can't fast forward, but, still a big opportunity ahead of this team.
I think because you're absolutely right. Like, you can hit your stride the next few weeks and position yourself. Like we said before, you want to finish that Maryland game and feel like, you know what, they're as ready as they can be. And then you roll the ball out there and see what happens. But I think the difference between this year's team and last year's team, and I think in the aggregate, this year's team is probably more talented, but especially with the injuries, like Rod Moore's been banged up. Justice Haynes, I don't know if we'll see him again. You hear surgery, and I have a hard time believing he's going to take the field in 26 days against Ohio State. This team is lacking these mistake erasing star caliber players. And maybe Saturday night, Jordan Marshall was that to a T. Maybe he is that guy, but then, you worry about the workload with him. And now he's kind of the unquestioned guy there. You were able to beat Ohio State last year because you had guys like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant who single-handedly won you that game. Kalel Mullings, clutch runs helped win you that game. Do they have enough of those guys? And I think Bryce Underwood can be that. Will he get there this year? I don't know. There are times this year where I felt yes. Obviously, it's a bit of a downward trend at the moment, but I'm still not worried about him. This is all part of it with a young quarterback. Look how quickly the narrative is flipped with, how a guy like Arch Manning is playing right now late in the season. Not that it's a one-to-one comparison, but those are my concerns at the moment. From there, we'll see what happens. It's a much-needed bye week. Maybe you don't get Justice Haynes back, but it's huge for guys like Cole Sullivan, Jimmy Rolder, just getting as healthy as you can possibly be. Jay Sean Barham in that mix, Rod Moore in that mix as well. Just see how healthy you can get, have some good opportunity practices. Maybe there are some, Chris, to your point, some of the better players this year of guys that didn't affect the team as much in fall camp and then burst onto the scene or burst after the bye week. Maybe there's something there on that front with them as well. So any other thoughts on where the football team is at right now, fellas?
Nope, just hopeful, guys. I'm excited to see him play in 2 weeks. I can't wait to go to Chicago and see this team play again. Love my bye weeks because I love watching college football all day, guys. Even if Michigan's off, we still have 12 opportunities. It just gets delayed for a week is the way I look at it. And then I get to watch from 11 a.m. or whatever it is, or 12 noon till 3 a.m, guys, just watching college football. It's going to be fun. So hopefully it's a good slate. Are there some good games coming up this weekend, guys? Have you had a chance to look at those yet?
I honestly have no idea.
Look too close. But I mean, what I'm excited for, Northwestern, USC, 9 p.m. Friday night. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, so I might just stay up Friday night and just continue to watch, replays until
College Game Day comes on at 9:30 and you're good to go.
Right, 100%. I'll just stay up and make a 48-hour marathon out of it or something. But it's a great time of year, and I will not take it for granted ever, guys. Especially the older you get, the more you appreciate it. Every opportunity to watch Michigan football. Hopefully, it's a better product on the field in a couple of weeks. I think it will be, guys. I still have faith that there is enough leadership and there's enough good talent on this team that and I think Bryce Underwood's better than he's shown. I think that's very clear. So hopefully there's a reset and they come out and play a really, really good game in a couple of weeks.
Just rattle off some go ahead.
Or no, you have some games there?
I was just going to rattle off a couple games. Obviously, you said Northwestern USC could be interesting. That's a Friday night game. Same time Friday night, if you're into the American Athletic Conference, Tulane at number 22, Memphis. BYU, Texas Tech. That's a top 10 matchup at noon on Saturday. Let's see in the 3:30 window. Texas A&M, Missouri. Oregon at Iowa is at 3:30. So there are some good games. LSU at Alabama. Navy's taking on Notre Dame. Always interested what happens when Notre Dame takes on a service academy. So there's a little juice to it. It's not quite what some of the other slates have been, but there's some good games there.
What are the other Big Ten games? There's got to be a noon Big Ten game, right? What's Big Noon? Or is that BYU?
That's got to be
It's Indiana at Penn State is Big Noon. Yeah. We got Ohio State at scrappy Purdue. Maybe Purdue can put a scare into someone else. I don't think it'll happen.
No.
Got a slap fight between Maryland and Rutgers. Oregon and Iowa play each other. Washington at Wisconsin. Night game, 9 p.m. This could be kind of fun. Nebraska at UCLA.
Well, there you go. Yep. So there's going to be some fun ball to watch, fellas. And hey, it's that time of year. So it's getting colder. Like you said, we're going to see some snow flurries. We got some Buckeyes shaking in their boots about that. Gosh, if there's an inch of snow on the ground on November 29th, forget it. Just send the band.
Yeah. The only other thing I have too, just on, football before we move on, with Bryce Underwood, it's one of those things all summer. Everyone, well, how's he going to be? You go on any radio show or whatever it is, or just anywhere, honestly. People asking me what I think Bryce Underwood is going to be. I'm like, I think he's going to be pretty good. I mean, there'll be some growing pains and, there'll be some rough patches and, you use these cliches. This is what that is, right? You're seeing it on the field and he's going to have to keep clearing hurdles. And, it's not always going to look the same from week to week. It looked pretty similar from Michigan State to Purdue, but it didn't look that similar from Washington, his best game, to Michigan State. So it can go in the other direction, in some of these games as well. And really, if they find ways to win, even if he's not playing at his best, and then you have a great game plan for Ohio State like they usually do, and most of those were under Jim Harbaugh. But, Sharon Moore was involved in those certainly towards the end of Harbaugh's tenure. Then, you may have some good opportunities for him to make some plays and some things you've been working on all year for Ohio State. So it can change on a dime. I will say, footwork is one of the things that is really tough for a young quarterback to master. And Ryan Van Bergen, listening to the show with Anthony on Saturday night, made a great point about these guys don't get hit in practice. And Chip Lindsey talked about this a few weeks ago when we talked to him. Feeling the rush is just something that a young quarterback has to figure out. And when there's a lot of pressure, right, how to move in the pocket, where to go, they're not allowed to get anywhere near that dude, on State Street. So when he's on Main Street or in a road environment, when it's even tougher, it's just stuff that, you have to figure out with experience, and it's hard to do. And, look at JJ McCarthy. His footwork was kind of all over the place at times in 2022. And then in 2023, I'm thinking of, especially early in the year when he was really dialed in, and then, obviously played well throughout the entire year, but you could just tell those mechanics, like sliding up in the pocket against UNLV and these footwork on play action and all this stuff. It's way more crisp. So it's amazing what a year can do. He's going to be much, much better next year. But I will say that his mobility is huge for this team. I mean, he had some big scrambles against Purdue. Those were huge. 2 or 3 of them were third down pickups. And, so that's big. That's a huge difference between the offense last year and this year. Is you have a mobile quarterback. Davis Warren wasn't that. Bryce Underwood is that, and he does a lot more better than Davis Warren did. But just saying one distinct difference when people start saying that the offense looks similar to a year ago is that he's mobile. That can help a young quarterback that doesn't have everything in his game yet. So, I'm excited to see how he plays. But yeah, it's been frustrating last couple of weeks, but I think there's much more to show.
The last point on Bryce, too, I think I would make is so often when you start a freshman quarterback, and it's program dependent, situation dependent, but I think a lot of times you can bake in somewhere where you're going to lose a football game solely based on that guy not being ready or making the big mistake. And for the most part, I think Michigan's avoided that. He wasn't good at Oklahoma. The team wasn't good at USC, but I didn't feel like those were entirely Bryce Underwood bad performances. There are the ups and downs that come, it doesn't matter if he was a walk-on or the number 1 overall recruit in the country. The last time he went on the road and played a game before they went to Oklahoma or before they played the games they did this year, he was playing at Howell High School. So there's adversity. There's these data points that you have to experience and go through and go in the lab and correct. And for the things that we feel like ail this team right now, he's not very high on my list of concerns, unless he plays bad 3 weeks in a row. But that's just what you're gonna get. Sometimes you're gonna have these games where he looks like Jared Goff against Washington, and then where he looks like some random that you pulled off the street. So got to be better. I think he will be, and it's a big couple weeks here coming up for the Michigan Wolverines. Like we said, bye week this Saturday. And then they will play at Northwestern at Wrigley Field, go to Maryland, and then final exam November 29th against the Ohio State Buckeyes. I want to move into Michigan basketball.
Howell won that game, right? Bobby Kanker
they did.
Company, yeah.
They did, yeah. There are some wackos on Twitter that said that that was proof that he wasn't a big-time player when it happened, by the way. So take that for what it is. Let's get into Michigan basketball. By the time a lot of you guys hear this, it'll either be right before the first game starts or maybe even after the fact. So I want to go a little more evergreen with them and do a brief season preview, more so from a superlative perspective. I think we all are pretty comfortable saying that we think this is one of the best teams in the Big Ten. Clayton put him at number 1 in his Big Ten power rankings in our basketball preview edition of our magazine. They are, a Big Ten contender. They're a national title contender. All of those things are out there for them. And we know that a guy like Yaxel Lendeborg is probably going to be the star that stirs the drink. Last that checked, he was at, I think, plus 1,000 on BetMGM for player of the year. So maybe that's something you get on early on, because I don't know there's going to be much of an opportunity to get it at the plus 1,000 or lower odds. So take advantage of that if you can. But I wanted to start with a superlative for who's going to be the number 2 guy. If Yaxel's the unquestioned number 1, when this team needs a bucket, or when this team if there's a Robin to Yaxel's Batman, and maybe it's a rotating cast too. But if either of you had to pick one guy to be that second guy, who would you go with and why?
I would go Elliot Cadeau, because the ball's going to be in his hands a lot. I like what I've seen from him being able to get to the rim. Honestly, I think he's got he's shooting the ball. I've seen him make some shots. So, and that's going to be obviously the big test, right? Can he make the long ball? But to me, his importance is magnified by the fact that there isn't that number 2 ball handler behind him that is you really trust with the ball in his hands, right? So one of the reasons that you're going to see Lendeborg with the ball in his hands at more as well. So I think LJ Cason's banged up from what we heard a little bit. So they need him to come on as well. But to me, it's Cadeau. I love the way he sets up his teammates. He seems confident with the ball, gets 2 feet in the lane. So they're going to need him to take a little bit of a scoring bump from what he was last year, in my opinion, and in addition to his assist numbers. But he's going to get every opportunity, because they're going to have a hard time taking him off the floor.
I think Yaxel's easily their best player, but actually, Anthony, it's funny you use the term straw that stirs the drink. I've been using that for Elliot Cadeau, because I think he's kind of the catalyst of this team, and he's the number 2 in terms of second best player, in my opinion. And, we saw him go to Yaxel, who admitted he rushed a few of those shots at the end of the St. John's game. But you're going to go to Cadeau a lot too. And they have with the pick and roll, which also involves whatever center is out there, whether it's a Daimara or Merez Johnson. We've seen him play, some overlap minutes as well, but I think it'll be one of those two as kind of that third option, or, the fourth, whoever the other one is. And that's kind of your big 4 this year. And then you have more residual players like Namari Burnett, Roddy Gale, LJ Cason. Will Cheddar is going to have a role off the bench, not as a 5 like we saw him against Cincinnati, but more the role we saw him in the St. John's exhibition. So I think it's Cadeau. And, he had 9 assists the other night against St. John's in that exhibition that they essentially approached like a regular season game. And still you felt like he wasn't fully comfortable, and these guys haven't played a ton together. Merez Johnson missed a ton of practice time. Adai Mara said he missed 4 or 5 practices the week, before that Cincinnati exhibition, then got back into the swing of things. But he arrived on campus late in the summer because of the whole visa thing. So this team is just going to get more comfortable, and that includes Elliot Cadeau, who's going to learn the guys that he's playing with more and more as the season goes on. So I think it's Cadeau and Yaxel. That's the 1-2 punch plus the big guys, and that's a hell of a talent. But I agree, guard plays a little bit of a concern in terms of depth, and just are you going to get elite guard play at all times? It was too inconsistent last year, and we saw that was kind of one of their downfalls, honestly. Trey Donaldson, the bigger games, couldn't. I'd say the Auburn game and then against Michigan State, when you have elite defenders out there, he couldn't do anything. I think Cadeau will be different, and that's what gives them part of the upside that they have.
I was going to say Cadeau for all the reasons that you guys did, so I'll just keep it rolling here. Let's move on to most improved returnee. Of the guys that were on this team last year, who do you think takes the biggest step? And I think this one might wind up being universal too.
Go ahead, Clay, you start.
Well, to steal Mike Boynton Jr.'s answer from the other day, naturally it's kind of LJ Cason, because you can make a big jump between freshman and sophomore year. And so you kind of have to go with him. But, most important returnee, Namari Burnett, Roddy Gale. Roddy Gale can make a jump because we've seen he can play well. He just didn't do it for 2-3 months. So
almost the entire year.
Yeah. He had a good November and a great March, and that was about it. But he figured out a way to impact winning, regardless of whether or not he was making shots. right? He started turning it over a little bit less and played a little bit smarter. And I thought the role of him coming off the bench was better. He's going to start this year, at least at the beginning of the season. So I think it's Roddy or LJ. And then I just love the consistency that you get with Namari. But yeah, I guess I'll go with that.
I think it's LJ Kaysen, as long as he's healthy. Again, he's been banged up, missed a little bit of time the other day. It's going to be interesting to see if he goes tonight. So, but he's the guy that, in my opinion, has to make the biggest jump too for this team to really not have that weakness, right? I think he can do some things getting to the rim, as we saw in the postseason last year. And to me, he is primed for that as long as he maintains his confidence. He came out, guys, when he was a true freshman, he was at times the best player on the floor in their early practices. That's how good he was when he first got here. Of course, when people find out your weaknesses and the speed of the game against real opponents, that changes some things. But to me, he's got what it takes as long as he's healthy to really make an impact on this team. I've always liked the kid and thought that he was a little bit underrated after seeing his high school film. I know that Dusty May didn't think he was underrated. He flat out told us, he said, we knew he was better than his ranking. So expect him to have a really nice year.
3 for 3 for the second category in a row, especially if he is the closest thing they have to a true backup point guard or an on-ball guard. I think he's going to have a huge opportunity this year. And yeah, and we had heard or that he was one of the guys this summer. Mike Boynton said that there may have been a stretch where he was one of their better players. So I'm extremely excited to see what he has to bring to the table. Unsung hero. I'll start off with this one since I had the same pick as you guys in the first two categories. I'm going to go with Namari Burnett. On a championship caliber team, I think he probably is maybe your fourth, fifth, maybe even sixth best player, depending on configuration. But what he does for a guy who came into Michigan with a bit of a rap of being injured and never quite living up to his potential. He's played all 69 games that he's started since he arrived in Ann Arbor. And I think that, I think he's been a guy that has been a rising tide, maybe not to the extent of think of like an Eli Brooks was, but he is as reliable as it gets for what you're going to get out of him and what he does bring to the table.
I'm going with Will Cheddar, and I think Will's not going to get as many minutes, right? But I think that there are going to be games when they're going to need his three-point shooting and his energy. And a guy that, in my opinion, is one of the leaders, the glue guys on this team that really holds guys accountable. So it's going to be partially for what he brings on the floor, but partially his leadership as a captain. I love the guy, and I think you're going to see him shoot the ball really well this year too. I think he's going to get more opportunities, and there are going to be times that he earns a little bit more playing time because he gets on a heater or something.
Those are the two picks, I think. I'm going to go with Namari because I think one of the things he brings to this team is spacing, and that's kind of an unsung thing. I mean, the ability to shoot really deep. He's going to be on the floor more, and just the impact in terms of culture, really both Namari and Will Cheddar have. It's something you can't measure, so that's another unsung quality. But those two are tremendous picks, and really you need stars like we talked about with Yaxel and Elliot Cadeau, and I think the two big guys have that potential to be stars. They haven't been yet in their careers, but you also need the glue guys. You also need the culture drivers, and Michigan's got kind of all the ingredients there.
All right, next one. I'm going to go with the freshman you are most excited to watch this year.
It's Trey McKinney, obviously, and I think he's going to get better and better. He got off to a little bit of a rough start, but this guy can flat out shoot the ball. He's got an IQ through the roof. He's going to be a huge part of this team. You're going to see by the end of the year why Dusty May said this guy always makes the right play, and he's hard to take off the floor, in my opinion. He got thrown right into the fire, guys, against some really good guards against Cincinnati and some quickness that he hadn't seen before. So, but to me, he's going to be a key contributor on this team.
His head was spinning a little bit against Cincinnati, and he looked even honestly, it's your second ever college game, and it was essentially a scrimmage. You're at Madison Square Garden, and he looked that much more comfortable in his second time out. He may have a big game tonight or next week against Wake Forest in his hometown or near his hometown, Flint, Detroit, playing there. I'm going to go with McKinney as well, just because we're going to see him a lot. He's going to be in the rotation, I think, to begin the year. And, he's fearless. That's one thing about him. He is not afraid to take a shot when he's open. He's not afraid to take a shot when he's not open, and that's something that they're trying to make sure he realizes. Don't be Orchard Lake, St. Mary's aggressive. Just be aggressive, Trey. You can hit a Daimara down low, even though you have maybe a little bit of space to shoot the shot, and that's going to be an adjustment. But hell, I'd rather, he's a warrior in a garden right now. I'd rather have a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. So, man, I think Trey McKinney's got a heck of a career ahead of him, even if it's a rough start, or maybe if it's not, or if he hits the LJ Kaysen rough patch or whatever it is, right? It's going to be, several years, I think, of him.
It's obviously Trey McKinney, but I'm extremely excited to see where Winters Grady factors into this as well. I think that Michigan, even with as good as we think they are, shooting is outside shooting is a bit of a question mark. And they didn't have enough of it off the bench last year after Sam Walters got injured. I think Winters Grady is going to plug into that type of role and do really well on this team. I don't know how many minutes a night he's going to get, but I'm pretty comfortable that when he pulls up from the outside, they have a pretty good shot of getting points on the board. So Winters Grady is a guy that I don't want to say he's fallen under the radar just because they have so many good players, but where he winds up in the rotation is a big question mark for me. I think that's all I had written down here. There was one more. I can't find it. General thoughts on this team as we head into the opener. What do you see? It's kind of an interestingly spaced out schedule where you're going to play your opener tonight and then you won't play a game for 8 days. So in these first 2 games over the first 15 days of the season, whatever it is, what would you like to see this team that maybe you aren't sure of at the moment?
Less turnovers. I think that's the obvious one, right? Value the ball. And Dusty May said, we are going to do 10 different things until we fix it. And I trust that he will, because some of the boneheaded mistakes that they're making, I mean, that cost them probably a really comfortable win against St. John's. I mean, you can't just throw the ball away when you're coming up the floor to a guy who's not looking for the pass, things like that. And I think that'll come a little bit more as guys are playing together a little bit more and know what to expect. But it also has to do with awareness and fundamentals. One of the reasons that John Beeline always stressed it, right? The pivots and the everything else and catching and throwing bunch passes and all that, and why his teams didn't turn the ball over that much. So they're going to be some more tempos, as Dusty May said, because they play with more tempo. And they're going to be some more turnovers, and because there are more possessions, 85, I think he said the other night. So it's one of those deals where that's got to improve. But I really love Morez Johnson's game, guys. I love watching him play, and I can't wait to see what he brings on a night-to-night basis. This team is going to win the Big Ten, in my opinion. I'm with Clay, 1 or 2 for sure, and I just think they have so many pieces, and they're so well coached that this team is primed for a deep run. And I think most people in the country would agree.
I just want to see them get more comfortable on both ends in the first 2 games, right? You have the one game tonight, and then you have a lot of practice time, which is not usually the case. And then you have a Friday night game at TCU where you're going on the road, and you've already been in a good environment at Madison Square Garden. So, the learning curve there, I think they wanted to accelerate that with the way they scheduled the exhibitions, and then you have a heck of a non-conference schedule. So you got to get up to speed pretty quickly. So this is a pretty big, 11 days, right? And even count the TCU game in there. And so I think that as you get a little bit healthier, there's more practice time with these guys, but comfort on both ends. I mean, they've been allowing a lot of points. It's been faster games. We didn't have your big guys in the first game, and then the second game goes to overtime, and they allowed a lot of free throws and shots at the rim and things like that. But just settling in, forming your identity early on this season, because like I said earlier, I think they have the ingredients. It's just like when it's going to come together, and you're playing for a high seed in the NCAA tournament. I think Dusty May scheduled that way, that he gave them an opportunity to notch some marquee wins, but also gives you the chance to lose some games and, get behind the 8 ball there in terms of seeding. So, as quickly as they can get up to speed and start that evolution process, the better, because you have a lot of really tough games in even November and December, let alone January. And then if the Big Ten schedule wasn't tough enough, you got Duke in February. So it's a gauntlet.
I was just looking at that stretch they have from, Valentine's Day through the 21st, where they're going to play UCLA at home, Purdue on the road, and then go to DC and play Duke. That is a murderer's row. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Speaking of fun to watch, I think I'm excited to see how they allocate the minutes in the front court. How often guys like Yaxel Lendeborg and Merez Johnson and Adayamara are all on the floor together, what the combinations between two of the three look like. That's, I think, going to be a lot of fun to watch. And a guy like Merez Johnson, I think he has more to his game than what he showed last year at Illinois, and Michigan feels that way too. And you're going to see him play a little bit of the four. So super excited for that. Of course, 8:30 at Chrysler. Where's that? What channel is this game on?
Fox Sports 1.
Fox Sports 1. All right. You don't have to. It's the first look at the team where you don't need to have a streaming package that you'll only use twice a year. So congrats to Michigan fans on that one. Let's move into questions now to close out our Monday night show. We'll start with a basketball question from Bloomer, who asks, how deep will the rotation be for the team, and what players will possibly redshirt?
Probably 9, right? And I think it kind of depends on injuries too, right? So it's funny because Cordell was one guy that they were talking about, man, he's physically ready to play now, but and he's already older. So do they use him at times and take away the red shirt? I think that's possible, right? Maybe to get him in there to bang a little bit and get some fouls or something like that. So you talked about Winters Grady. I want to know what his role is going to be as a shooter. They could certainly use him there. So, but I think that's where they are now, and I think that's why Dusty May is taking some of these projects as well. We'll call them projects like Ricky Liburd, right? Because if you have 13 of those guys or 15 of those guys, and some of those guys aren't going to be here next year, you want some of those guys that you can develop too. You don't want your team turning over every year.
I got 9 as well. I think it's just too hard to play 10 consistently, but I think the way they played it against St. John's, where you had Winters Grady play a short 2-minute shift in the first half, that makes it 10 guys that played, but I wouldn't count him necessarily in the rotation. But it is going to evolve, right? You're going to have some injuries like you mentioned, Chris. You're going to have guys in and out. You're going to have Winters Grady come into a game in that 2-minute shift and hit 2 threes and earn a second half shift. And then maybe that gets him some playing time in the next game and somebody else decreases. But, man, John Beilein, it's funny listening to him on the Huge Show, which he's going to be back doing that weekly this year. Last year talking about, man, I could never manage a rotation more than 8 because it's just hard to keep all these guys happy and whatever. And he was impressed with the way Tom Izzo did it last year at Michigan State, and Dusty May did it with 8 and 9 guys. It wasn't as deep as they could be this year, but I think it's going to be around then. Red shirts, I think Malik Cordell is going to play, but probably not in every game. Does he play in 11 games or 13 games or whatever? And he could impact in some of those, but like you said, he's old. I think just Ricky Liburd will be the only red shirt on this year's team in terms of freshmen.
And it's still just you play in one game, it's burned, right? They haven't changed that rule at all.
Yep.
Well, they should change that rule because it's stupid.
I agree.
Let's go to a football question from Tyrone88. He says, do you think the rotation on the defensive line is odd? It seems like there are critical moments in the game, and U of M doesn't have their best edge or defensive tackles on the field. We've talked about this a lot. There have been important drives, and U of M will have their third team in on the D-line. Yeah, it's one of my pet peeves, especially when it comes after a touchdown drive where you take the lead or you extend your lead. It's super strange. I don't get it, and I don't know who sets that.
I agree 100%. And that's something that I don't think we saw the rotation in the secondary, did we, on Saturday that we had been? I think they tightened it up a little bit.
We saw quite a bit of rotation. We saw Caleb Anderson and Jaden Sanders and
but I think
Caleb Anderson got beat on the fourth down, and I don't know why he was in, but yeah.
I thought I saw a stat where they said they really tightened it up. Shamar Earls didn't play. Some of the other freshmen that had been playing, so maybe they'd start tightening it up a little bit. But I agree with you, Anthony. There doesn't seem any rhyme or reason to it, and it's not to keep guys fresh. You say you want to win in the fourth quarter and so on and so forth, but when you've got momentum, it's kind of like, to me, when you have a relief pitcher in baseball who gets through the 8th on 5 pitches and he's just mowing people down, and then you take him out in the 9th just because, right? Because you have a closer. Sometimes maybe just leave those guys in there and let them do their thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's something. It's not that they're rotating. It just feels like at the timing, it feels pre-planned. You're going to get this drive, you're going to get that driver. We're going to have Dom Nichols and Nate Marshall or Lugard Edekpai start this drive. And like you said, Anthony, it's a lot of times it's after a long drive. I think Ernest Hausman was out at linebacker. I know this question was more specifically about the D-line, but Ernest Hausman got a series off right after the 9-minute drive, and then the next possession over, after a quick or a long Michigan drive, I think, on offense, whatever it was. And you're thinking, why? Like, this guy's not tired right now. You can find another time for him to get a blow. But the D-line thing, where you start a drive and then they start marching down, you're like, all right, now here comes Derek Moore and TJ.
Yeah, they're on the 30. Else. They're on your 30 drive.
You could have just shut them down before. Like,
yep.
I don't know. I mean, do I pay enough attention to how other teams do it? No, but it does seem unique. So it's been a source of frustration for a couple of years for me. So
I think they're guilty of that at running back sometimes too. When both those guys have been healthy, when both Donovan Edwards and Khalil Mullings were healthy last year, I felt like we would go too long without seeing the other guy. But again, it's their rotations. That's how they decide to set it. It's just, it feels like they do go too long at times without having their best players on the field. So we've talked about that a lot this year. We'll go to this one from West Coast Wolverine. He says, do they plan on utilizing Jasper Parker more these next couple of weeks to help keep Marshall healthy? And with our offense looking so choppy, do you guys think that Bryce Underwood's development has been stunted at all?
Yeah, I do. And I think part of it's on him too. I think he's been uncomfortable. You got receivers dropping passes. You've got offensive linemen that they're leaky, but there are times that he's not picking up blitzers that he's got to be responsible for. He's not hitting receivers like he was earlier in the year either. So it's on all of them. It's not just him, and he can be frustrated, but you can still only do your part. So hopefully he'll get back on it. He was good against Washington. Everybody's like, oh, he keeps regressing. He had a great game against Washington. So we'll see what happens. But in my opinion, it's the improvement really starts with the line and giving him more time to throw so that he does not have those happy feet.
I thought Bryson Kuzdal looked pretty good. When you talk about the running backs, some bursts on a couple of those plays, some good patience. He said he's been working on that because he is fast, and sometimes he has the inclination to just hit the hole too early, but he let the blocks develop. I think it's whoever between Parker and Kuzdal can pass protect better, and it seems to be who is just slightly better than bad at this point. It's hard to do earlier in your career without a lot of experience, but I don't know that they trust Jasper Parker as much in that situation right now. So if you're going to have to play significant snaps, and it could be on either run or pass, it might have to be Kuzdal at this point.
It's from AM89. He watches these shows as well. Thank you, AM. He's always in the chat, so appreciate that. He says Northwestern is tough, but how is the matchup overall? Nebraska needed a big kick return and just snuck past them in Lincoln.
Nebraska's no good, so that doesn't help, right? No, they're going to play hard. Northwestern's going to play hard. Michigan's got better players. Again, a part of it is going to be how much of their injured guys come back. So this is a game I would expect Michigan to win by 10 plus. At the same time, if they don't come to play, if they play like they did against Purdue, then it could be a dogfight.
Yeah, I mean, Northwestern is capable. They're playing some teams tight, and they've won some games here. I think only 3 losses on the year coming off their second bye here. So yeah, you have to play a hell of a lot better than you did against Purdue, because you won't be at the big house, and you're playing a better opponent. But yeah, excited to dive more into that one and watch them on Friday night against USC.
Last one here is from Ash34 Go Blue. He says, what will the coaches do when Evan Link is healthy? The O-line is actually looking like it's the only unit improving game to game. Is there any way he could be inserted back into the starting lineup?
I hope not. I like Blake Frazier there. I like his upside at left tackle, and I think that's his position in the future. I think Evan Link will be a guard, so give him some time to come back. Heck, I'd let Evan Link go in there and battle it out with El Hadi at left guard, frankly, if he comes back.
Yeah, I don't know what they'll do. They've done it either way so far this year. You had El Hadi come back and get his spot. You had Brady Norton come back and not get his spot with Jake Guarnera. At a certain point, maybe you go with the continuity, which would be keep the guy in that's currently playing. So that'll be an interesting decision, a decision that I hope they have to make, because you kind of need that depth back there.
I would agree. I think they need the bodies, and let practice sort it out. I think long-term he should play guard. It doesn't seem like they share that sentiment, but that's how the staff feels about it. That's going to do it for us today. Appreciate you guys watching, not live, after the fact, but we will be back Thursday for our weekly pod there. Probably talking some basketball. We'll see what else Clayton has cooked up for us, but be sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, use that promo code UM1 for 2 months of access to our site for $1. Fellas, I'm excited to get back out to Chrysler, excited to have a bye week. It's going to be start of a good week, good month, and hopefully great rest of the year. So for Chris Ballas, for Clayton Safey, for our producer Megan behind the scenes, I'm Anthony Broom. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.